Fish on First has partnered with About the Fans to launch a merchandise collection. Rep the FOF logo and more Marlins-inspired apparel. Find it all at aboutthefans.com. Enter coupon code FOF10 at checkout to get 10% off your order. FOF10 for a 10% discount.
This is Griffin Conan. You're watching Fish on First Live.
Hello and welcome to this edition of FOF Live presented by About the Fans. As always, you can check out About the Fans in the new FOF merch collection, which you can get 10% off with code FOF10 at checkout. And we have shirts, stickers, hats, and of course, probably the best one right now is Father Like Son, Griffin Conine, Jeff Conine shirt, which is very topical right now. We'll get into that later in the show. As you can see, it's duo. It's a duo today. It's a battery. It's a pitcher and a catcher. You have myself, Daniel. We have Eli. We'll have Kevin joining us later for the press box report as the Marlins are looking to take on the New York Mets and Juan Soto. We'll see everything that goes on there. But, of course, we have to talk about probably, you could say, maybe the second biggest story in baseball aside from the torpedo bats, we will get to in a little bit. But first, Eli, aside from the torpedo bats, the Marlins won the series against the Pirates. Very few people even picked that correctly in our prediction time, taking 3-1 against the Pirates, sole possession in the NL East. And as people like to say, if the playoffs ended today, the Marlins will be the division winners and going to the playoffs, but not happening in March. But Eli, this was a very fun series. All 3 wins came in walk-offs for the Marlins, facing up against Paul Skeens. And, the Pirates also had some trouble with their bullpen with unlikely David Bednar, all-star pitcher. Just what happened this series for the Marlins to just get those 3 walk-offs?
Right. I don't want to put too much of the blame on individual guys on the other team, but it's really Bednar and O'Neal Cruz that stick out as the GOATs from Pittsburgh's perspective. Bednar was messy in all 3 of the games that he pitched in. The series was opening day, and then I guess he did pitch. I mean, he barely got through it on that 1 win for the Pirates in game 2, but then of course, literally throwing the game away in the finale on Sunday with a wild pitch that allowed Derek Hill to score. First time in about 100 years that the Pirates have lost 3, that any team has lost 3 out of their first 4 games in walk-off fashion. The Marlins last year didn't have their first walk-off until April 30th. They'd wait more than 1 month to get a single walk-off, and they got all that done in a single series this time right here. And I mean, Brian's absolutely right. Basically, everybody had this wrong, as you pointed out. Among all our predictions, only a couple, Thomas Joseph and Romeo, had the Marlins actually winning this series, understandably so, just because of last year. This was the same matchup as last year, except the Marlins, lower expectations coming out of spring training, came in literally limping this spring because they had so many injuries at the end of camp. So even this inexperienced roster got even weaker. It was literally the youngest roster to enter the season. That being said, the outfield defense was great. The clutch hitting was there. It was a combination of those sort of things. You mentioned Skeens up top. To start with that, the reason why they won that game is because they were able to force him out of the game relatively early. They worked so many deep counts against him. So he only went 5 1/3, 5 2/3, which for him is a huge shock. And they were able to come back against the bullpen in the first place. So that was, it was a realistic best case scenario. It was night and day compared to last year because of how they totally crapped the bed in the same 4 games last season. And a lot of little things went well. A lot of no names in the bullpen stepped up. George Soriano got a win in there. There was Xavier Curry came back up from AAA all of a sudden in the final game to help keep that game within reach. And so many comebacks. I think on Saturday alone, they came back 4 separate times. They were trailing 4 separate times and won. They had to come back again 2 other times on Sunday. They had to come back on every single game. They came back and made things interesting, even the one game that they didn't win. Really, it's it was about as good as you could possibly want. And it's things that, I think the fan base desperately needed it because it's so easy to check out of this team as soon as they fall to last place. They can make fun of people for pointing out that they're in first place right now when it's really premature. But the reality is, as soon as they actually play like a losing team, people are going to automatically, it's confirmation bias. People are going to check out as soon as this team sinks to the bottom of the standings, and they bought themselves some time before we think that possibility could happen.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see what happens there. Now with the Mets coming on and how much firepower they have and how they looked against the Astros, maybe the Marlins could sneak in a couple games there against the Mets. But as always, Marlins Mets, always interesting to see that kind of matchup. But I want to go more in depth on this series, just on the sole fact Marlins winning 3 out of these games, 3 walk-offs. I want to talk about with you, Eli. You could say maybe the star of this series, and that is Griffin Conine. It felt like coming out of this series, maybe the number one guy that maybe media or fans or whoever the case may be were talking about was Griffin Conine, and rightfully so. He had a great series. He had a home run. He had probably easily the best catch so far in this short stretch of the season to rob a home run. And, of course, his dad getting inducted to the Marlins Hall of Fame. I think the Conines had a great weekend, especially Griffin Conine, the way he performed. Just what has stood out for you from Griffin? Because looking at this series, if you told me that he could be the potential All-Star Game selectee for the Marlins and maybe even a Gold Glove dark horse, I would be in tune for that. I would not be disregarded to that. Just slowly on basic play. I know that's a lot to talk about early on, but he impressed. I think he was the most impressive player on the field for the Marlins for sure.
Well, if you have to pick one, the game-tying home run or the game-saving catch, which one was your favorite moment from him?
I would say the home run. I know the catch, but the home run happened on Sunday. It happened with his dad watching it, getting into the Hall of Fame. I know maybe Griffin probably put a little more into that than maybe other at-bats. But I think that one just meant more for Griffin and the Conines. But I would say the home run, especially to save that lead there and eventually winning the series there for the Marlins. I would say a home run. I would say the home run for sure. Because Jeff was talking about earlier that the wall there is a little too short. Back in the old stadium, that probably would have been gone. But it was. I would say the home run.
That's the thing. And he mentioned it. I do remember seeing him in the minors making other home run robberies when he was down in Double-A, because they also have a small wall there. And he made a point of mentioning that in like the interviews post game. He seems, I don't think offended, but he's done this before. Yeah. This isn't actually like a totally new thing for him. He times it up pretty well. This is the one where he goes so far over the wall by several feet. That would have clearly made it out. And for him to bring it back is awesome. That is, I really bought into his defense already last year. I didn't need that reassurance. The big question continues to be the hitting and whether or not there's enough contact there to make this work, especially against lefty pitching. And he did get a couple reps against lefties during the series, but mostly being used as a platoon guy to this point. So he's a piece of this team. He is a lot more than we thought he would be even last summer before he got called up. It was really fair to wonder if it was just a charity call up when he got the debut in the first place, mainly because of those pronounced issues making contact. And so far this season, those issues haven't been there. There've been some loud outs. It's just been more balls in play overall from him. And that's a conscious adjustment that he's aware of, as it's a critical year for him, even though this is his first year as a full-time big leaguer. Who knows how many more there will be unless there's a big uptick in him as a well-rounded hitter, just because he's already 27 years old. He turns 28 midway through the season right here. And the Marlins have a few different options that are also lefty hitting corner outfielders between him and Stowers and Jesus Sanchez, who is getting pretty close to coming back. It might only be a few weeks that they have until they have to make some sort of decision on that one. But it's been an awesome story by all accounts, this team, it's one of those other things that this team really needed to keep people interested in the current phase of their rebuild, is having this sort of emotional connection, a guy that has he just knows ball really well, even with his father's presence. It's not like his dad didn't really get him anything to reach this point. He's the guy that was really highly regarded coming out of the draft. He was a guy that was put in so much time in the minor leagues, and they're hoping he's a late bloomer and that he actually sticks around a while. So this was for him a really solid start, and it's the pressure is on though. I think he knows that there's going to be quite a bit of competition for playing time moving forward, and this is his opportunity. So he has to really take advantage of it.
Yeah, and you mentioned with Jesus Sanchez, eventually when he does come back, who do you think is the odd man out? I mean, Derek Hill had a great series. Dane Myers had a walk-off. You have Griffin Conine, who had the play of the year so far. For you, who's the odd man out? Maybe of those three, or maybe it's someone like a Javier Sanoa who's out. But again, with Javier, he could play multiple positions. It just seems like maybe it's a good thing to have right now for the Marlins, where all these guys are producing. But it just seems like maybe for you, Eli, who's the man that's going down? Do you put down Stowers? You can't. He's also played really well also.
Well, we should spend a little bit of time on Stowers just because of how low the public opinion was of him just a week ago. He just
real low.
Yeah, really unproductive during spring training overall. All he did was draw walks, and so far this spring, this regular season, he's drawn some walks, but he's also actually made some solid contact, and of course in a really critical spot to get that walk off. And he also made a good catch himself. It wasn't a home run robbery, but it was also a really important one in a tie game on a ball that was right at him and he had to go back on. So to this point, it's really a dead heat between him and Conine. But there's like several machinations that could come up here. Like if both of them are playing well these next couple of weeks, then you got to look at Jonah Bride and Eric Wagman and the choice between them. As good as Bride was last year, I don't think there's anybody that fully bought in on him suddenly breaking out as a middle of the order bat. He's off to a really slow start. And with Wagman, it's kind of the same deal where they technically can play a couple different spots, but they don't add much defensive value. So, and they both hit from the same side. So it could be a little bit redundant, especially if they keep Matt Mervis in there. And then even Matt Mervis, like you can really point to all these guys that have such short track records. Things can flip really quickly. I mean, with Mervis, he hit a couple monster homers in spring training, but he struck out a ton. He had more swing and miss issues than anybody else, including Stowers in spring. Now he's off to a relatively slow start. So there are so many guys that that have minor league options and could be sent down if they don't optimally fit with this roster. Javier Sanoa at least has the versatility to play both the outfield and the infield, and that's going to be important. And if he's not going to be up, then they want to have somebody like him that is a utility guy to handle it right here. Talking through all the names, I actually wonder most about Mervis, because Mervis is the one that only plays one spot. He only plays first base, and there's serious to this point, he hasn't had many opportunities just because they're sitting him against lefties, including tonight. This might be the third straight night that he's sitting just because he's at the platoon disadvantage. Mervis is the one that I think is under the microscope most, even though he's not directly an outfielder. He's one that could be very disposable if there's not some signs that he can be a more well-rounded hitter.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, what do you do with this first base position? Because throughout this entire series, it feels like maybe that first base position has been the number one in terms of lacking the way that maybe compared to the other positions on the field, especially the outfield and how well all the outfield were playing this series. Eli, just with this first base position, is this something you're more worried as the season progresses? I'm still looking at the comments. Oh, Troy Johnston, bring him up. Do you bring up Davidson De Los Santos? How do you make shift of this this first base position? Because it seems like it's the most difficult one right now to really see how it goes. So you have Eric Wagman, who hasn't been playing well at all. You mentioned Jonah Bride and his struggles. Matt Mervis, only one position he's going to play at all. It just this first base position just seems like it's the biggest mess so far this season.
Yeah, they had a couple options at this time a year ago with Bell and Berger kind of splitting time there, and now to at this point where they do have a lot of options, but not one that you feel good about. Even De Los Santos, he's off to such a slow start in the minors. I think Brian's right on this. Like he's in the small sample, it looks like he actually is more disciplined, but there's still a lot of swing and miss concerns. He hits the ball hard, he just doesn't hit it enough, and he's so young. He's 21 years old. That they're not. I don't think he's going to be on the radar until we get to June, even if things are going well. So this is the time to work through the gazillion different options. This is the time to work through Bride and Wagaman and Mervis, and like one at a time. They might have to narrow it down. Like I said, potentially as soon as when Sanchez gets back, especially when Sanchez and Norby get back, and they're kind of on similar timelines. It seems like when those guys get back, I think one of those first base guys gets squeezed off in a corresponding move. It's wide open. At the same time, that's a position that is. You don't really need a long-term first baseman. There's some teams that have him. There's some teams that have a Matt Olson or a Freddie Freeman. There's not a lot of them. That's a spot where you could go into free agency. You could pick up a veteran on a one-year deal that has been there and done it before, but is still relatively affordable. I don't think they're that worried about it. The bigger concern is figuring out the up-the-middle positions. Things are looking pretty good with Edwards, pretty good with Otto, and pretty good. And center field is still a pretty big question right now. So I think first base is kind of back of their mind. They're not going to be overly they have time to like cycle through these guys and see if anything sticks before having to look to the minors for another option.
Yeah, we're mentioning a lot of the hitters now. Let's go a little bit on some of the starting pitchers that we saw over the course of this series and how they performed. I think maybe the top two pitchers really have to mention Max Meyer, how well he performed, and then Sandy. I think, Eli, we have to start with Sandy. This is Cy Young Award winner, all-star, face of the franchise, number one guy on this organization. People who go and they pay to go see him. Paul Skeens. I think Sandy in his first time out in since Tommy John surgery in the regular season game, I think he fared decently well. You could say he gave up a good amount of walks and maybe struggled at times to get where he was usually at before the Tommy John surgery. But Eli, what did you see from Sandy and just the way he performed in his first game and his first regular season game in almost a year?
Yeah, it was more good than bad for sure. It was a no-hitter through 4 2/3, I think, until that one rally at the very end got to him struggling to put batters away. One thing I didn't notice at the time that our intern, Sean McCormick, pointed out is that his release point is a little bit different than it used to be. He's dropped down a little bit. We don't know if that's intentional or not. They can measure this stuff really accurately now, through StatCast, and you could tell that his angle that he releases the ball is a little bit lower than it has been since he was a rookie or since this very beginning of his major league career. So I don't know if there's anything to that in whether that's intentional or not, but that's something I'll be watching for when he pitches again tomorrow. He got stretched out to around 90 pitches, and so that's pretty close to where he'll normally be. Might get a little bit of a longer leash in this next outing, but he's facing a tougher lineup moving forward. With there were just the walks piled up on him really suddenly, and that's the general question you have about any guy coming back from Tommy John. To me, is the control and how long that takes. Sometimes it takes a whole year to come back. Sometimes it weaves in and out from one game to the next, or even in the course of one game. He's throwing as hard as he did before he got hurt. I think he did top out either at 99 or maybe a couple at 100 in there. That's normal. It's about the locating those pitches is still going to, even somebody with his quality of stuff. Obviously, you don't want to put on too many free passes. And one thing we should mention about this series overall, the negative was how they couldn't control the running game at all. They've allowed like twice as many stolen bases as any other team has so far this season. And a few of those were on Sandy in that final ending. That's something that even in his Cy Young peak, he had a lot of trouble with holding on runners. That's what, and I don't think that's going to change all of a sudden. That's kind of a trade-off with all the good that comes with him. That's one of the deficiencies in his game. So I would hope that eventually he tries to get some sort of fix to that, but it's difficult when you're just slow to the plate a little bit. And the way to beat that is by just being dominant and not letting runners come out in the first place. That is still going to be a storyline to follow the rest of this year. I remember it being like a point of emphasis last year, entering the season of the Marlins, holding on runners And they kind of had mixed results with that in 2024. They threw out a lot of guys, but teams ran a lot against them. I think it was more bad than good from that regard. That continues to be something that I'm watching because this team's going to have to play great defense in all facets if they're going to have a chance to be competitive. We saw good outfield defense in that first series. I think all the other positions you still have some questions.
Yeah, I think Fandy really showed, some good stuff there, like you mentioned, Eli. But I think this is more again precautionary. Also, just the way that you mentioned going against that rally and giving up those walks. But let's move from Sandy really quickly before we bring in Kevin in a couple minutes. Let's talk about Max Meyer and how he performed. I thought Max Meyer could go up against everyone. I think he had the best pitching performance of the series. Max, 7 strikeouts. He gave up that home run early on, but really just fell into a groove right after that. And I think Max Meyer really performed very well. And it's helping his case that he is a starter. He is not a reliever. He is not any of that. He is a starter, helping himself solidify in this rotation. And Eli, what do you make up for Max in that game on Sunday for him? What do you think of Max?
It was great. There's no other way to slice it. The final line was pretty with just 1 earned run in that 5 2/3, and he was that 1 earned run was on a Kutch home run, and a really great swing by Andrew McCutcheon on a ball that was like near his shoulders to drive that out. That's one where you just tip your cap to one of the great players of the game, even at this advanced age. And aside from that, he settled in really well after that. His slider was as effective as I've seen it in any big league game. That's what carried him through the minors. I don't think he's had a single start prior to this where he was able to dominate big leaguers with that one pitch as often as he was. All the talk this spring was about how he has an expanded pitch mix and that he's got more weapons to use than ever before. This game, though, was all about the slider. Almost every one of his strikeouts came swinging on a slider, and because it was his command of it that was great. Everything was right at the knees, if not a little bit below. So when he's doing that, like, he doesn't really need all those other fancy pitches. He doesn't need a second sweeper. He doesn't really need his sinker that much. That was the story to me, is that one pitch reminds you of how special it is, what made him one of the consensus top prospects in the system when he was coming up.
And you got the breaking news really quickly. You saw Jurickson Profar suspended 80 games.
Wow, that report was right.
Brian De La Cruz, more run. Brian De La Cruz season.
That is going to be pretty relevant this next series, next weekend, playing the Braves for the very first time. But yeah, we got the confirmation from Jeff Passan, the first big drug suspension of the year. I think about as big as anyone that we saw last year, because Profar is coming off the best year of his career. And all of a sudden, he's gone. Let me just share that so that people are on the same page with this. And he just signed that 3-year deal with the Braves. He was an important placeholder before Acuna got back. Now he's going to miss half the season for them. For the winless Braves, the last place Braves. They're on the bottom of the standings, and now they take another hit.
Yeah, so more time for Brian De La Cruz, and we'll talk a little bit more about this next when they face the Braves next week. But we'll see how everything goes there. Acuna, DLC, and all those guys. Eli, before we bring in Kevin, and I'm sure we'll talk about this more when Kevin's here. Let's the biggest news of the week: the torpedo bats. It's torpedo season. It has been all of the craze now this weekend, especially when the Yankees brought it into their opening matchup against the Brewers, and it just seemingly shut down all the doors. Nestor Cortez gave up 5 home runs, I believe four in a row, 3 home runs in a row, all in the first pitch. It seemed to just go the craze. All baseball Jazz has it. Alec Boehm now has it. It's just not the Yankees. Now it's seemingly everyone on Major League Baseball rosters are going after this. As you can see here, the creator, Aaron Leanhart, Lenny, Kevin talked to him for about 8 minutes. You can go on Kevin's page and check that out. We'll bring in Kevin later in a couple minutes to explain more about these torpedo bats and what Lenny said about them. But Eli, you're in New York. Well, what's the craze, everything, the reactions to the torpedo bats, and maybe your opinion as well? Is this a fad? Is this here to stay, or is this going to be gone in the next CBA?
We'll have to see it play out. But this is a copycat league. That's the big takeaway. When a team has this it's not really totally a response to these first 3 games. These help that the Yankees are off to a hot start, but to hear him talk about it, this is something they were researching going back more than 2 years to 2023. This is something that's been in development, especially this past offseason, kind of under the hood. It's just the Yankees are the ones that came out of the gates using more of them with more different players and having more of those players hit home runs with them while using it. I think it's brilliant, brilliant idea. One of those things where really wouldn't have occurred to anybody on their own, but you see it happen and you're like, well, duh, you shouldn't be wasting all this wood on the end of the bat when you're not trying to hit the ball on the end of the bat. You should put it where you actually want to make contact in order for to barrel up balls more easily than you would otherwise. You're wasting it by having it at the end just like that. So by reproportioning the weight of the bat in a way that still weighs the same as a regular bat would, you have a better chance of crushing it if you actually land up with the sweet spot or anywhere close to the sweet spot right there. Yeah, made a lot of sense. I think we're going to see them on practically every team over the course of the season. Maybe not every player. I think Aaron Judge most prominently. He's not not yet. He's not a torpedo bat guy, but several of his other teammates are. We've already seen sentiments around the league. He himself says could be a few weeks until Marlins players themselves start having them used in games. We'll get more specifics as it gets closer in terms of who uses it and what their specifications are. The thing is, you can customize it a little bit. You can make it slightly different for different players depending on what their strengths are. So it's a fascinating wrinkle in this. My bigger takeaway is that last decade and a half, there's been so many advancements in pitcher performance and designing new pitches, throwing harder than ever before. And with hitters, it's been hard to keep up. So this is only natural to me that somebody was going to break through with advancements that allowed hitters to gain an edge that they didn't previously have.
Yeah. And I think with that, it's a great time now to bring in Kevin. Kevin from the Press Box Report. He's here to talk a little bit about the Mets and the Marlins series, a little bit more a deep dive into the torpedo bats. Did get to talk to Lenny, and most importantly, he got to talk to the man of the hour, Mr. Huascar Brazoban, our king, our legend. But first, Kevin, talk to us, the feelings through the clubhouse, talking to Clayton, talking to Lenny. Take me through your day so far.
First of all, can you guys hear me well?
Yes.
Yes.
Nice. All righty. These headphones work. All righty. Yeah, I mean, vibes, I think, are pretty high. The guys are feeling themselves right now, take 3 out of 4 against the Pirates. Got to feel pretty good about that. And torpedo bat season is looking like what we're talking about here for the most part. So, yeah, we spoke to Aaron Lenhart for a very long time. The clubhouse is now calling him El Torpedo. He was asked about that new nickname, so he says that, I'm going to go with that nickname, I guess, from now on. I thought it was Lenny. I liked Lenny, but now I'm El Torpedo. So, yeah, they're going to use these bats in a couple of weeks. That's the plan. The players have gone up to him. They've been introducing that. They're trying to be innovative, which is something he really noted on that interview. And, yeah, I think the vibes are good right now. Kyle Quantrill making his debut today, Marlins debut. So that should be fun to watch. And we're going to get a look at the torpedo bat with Francisco Lindor, who's been using it all spring.
Yeah. Let me get to the injury report because that was pretty positive across the board. Good news coming here. If you want to take us through it, starting with Edward, because he's one that is now taking a pretty big step towards returning to the rotation.
Yeah, we spoke to Clayton about it yesterday. It seems like it'll be a couple turns through the rotation up there in Jacksonville. So I'm not expecting a return probably maybe until the next homestand would be probably the best timeline, I would say, in my opinion. Sanchi, he's been working out here every day. Pre-game, I've seen him out there running. Yuri will throw against live hitters tomorrow, so that's pretty cool to see. Another step in his rehab. Weathers, I'm gotta guess he's going to go on a rehab assignment soon as well. So we'll see how that goes. And Nardi and Cronin seem like they're still a little bit behind in terms of just returning, And then Norby, as he's now kind of progressing just like Sanchez is, and maybe goes on a rehab assignment next week. Who knows?
Yeah, I think it does sound like Norby and Sanchez are on similar timelines, even though Sanchez got hurt a couple weeks before that. So that'll be, and then we talked about it before, but all the possible corresponding stuff we could see to get both Sanchez and Norby back in there. Yeah, I imagine one thing I want to also point out is that the Mets have plenty of their own injury concerns too, right here. I don't think people aren't going to feel bad for them because they spend a gazillion dollars on their team, including on Soto. But all the guys that they're missing right now, Francisco Alvarez, they're missing like 3/5 of their plans rotation, Sean Manaea and Frankie Montas, even Jeff McNeil in there. So they're a little bit shorthanded as well for people that aren't aware. But people want to know about Soto. What have you been able to see from Soto? Is there any? It's weird because he's played the Marlins plenty of times through the years. He's been in this division in the past, but obviously the hype is on another level just because of how much money he's getting now.
Yeah, I mean, $765 million. It's hard, it's a number that not many people are going to forget. I think when you think about, the amount of money this guy's making. Asked Clayton about him. Obviously, Clayton's last week or so as a Dodger was facing Juan Soto in the World Series. Having a game plan for that, I'm sure. And he says that it's a tough guy. He's a tough dude to face. He's a Marlins killer through and through. He's been destroying the Marlins. Doesn't matter what uniform he's wearing. He's been doing it for the last couple of years now. So, yeah, he's a pretty popular guy. I think that's, to say the least. Got a pretty good look at him. So what's up to him really quickly. He actually passed right by Isaac, and I saw it's pretty cool. So, yeah, he's a very good player.
With Isaac at the ballpark as well, looking in on us. Yeah, I remembered that that's a bigger storyline for tomorrow, Sandy versus Soto, because I think Sandy has faced him about as often as any other hitter during his career, and he's actually been pretty good overall in those head-to-head matchups. But
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's gonna be a fun matchup to watch. First time in a while too. Sandy didn't face him obviously last year, so yeah.
Do we have any clarity now with Jesus Tinoco getting hurt about how the late innings line up? I don't know if McCullough was asked about that either yesterday or today, but I mean Tinoco was kind of him and Fauché were kind of neck and neck for save opportunities, and now they're down another guy.
Seems like they're gonna go with Fauché, obviously, and I mean Bender got a pretty late look as well in that game, the extra inning game. So I'm interested to see what that'll look like. We obviously spoke about the Robert Arias, who may probably debut today, if not, that series finale against the Mets, depending on how long Conor Gillespie goes. So I think it'll be some sort of combination of Fauché. He probably won't pitch today. He went back to back. So probably if they're in the same situation tonight, you got to think it's going to be Bender. He looked pretty good in that first outing. We'll see what that looks like today if he has the opportunity to go in there and save this ball game.
Yeah, I guess last thing, Kyle Quantrill making his debut tonight. Based on he had an up and down spring training, as we saw. What are your expectations for him? As they throw him. Everybody else got to pitch against the Pirates, but he's the one spot in the lineup that now has to face a deeper lineup coming off. Yeah, he's in a weird spot in his career, of course, coming to this team after slumping in the second half last season.
Yeah, I think this is noted that he turned down a more lucrative offer to go back to Colorado instead to come here to Miami. And I think they really like what they've seen from Kyle. They think it was just, got here a little later than, the rest of the guys. And it took him a little longer to get it going. And he looked really good in his last official spring outing. Then had the sim game in the backfield. Had a sim game actually on Wednesday before opening day as well. He went 5 innings. So I'm assuming that's what he stretched out to at the moment. I mean, it would be nice if you could give them 6 because they really need some length out of the starting pitching more than anything right now. Not just the amount of relievers he's used, but how many innings they've had to use him. Soriano having to go to Tyler Phillips. I know he's a reliever, long reliever, but still, I mean, having to go 3 innings the other day. So they're going to be able to at least give him 6. So, and it's a tough matchup for him against the Mets, but I think it'll be fine, hopefully. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. But Cal, I'm excited to watch Cal launch probably for the first time live, at least regular season game. That's catch his debut. So yeah, the velo was down a little bit this spring. I'm curious to see what that looks like in the regular season. So yeah, I'm excited to watch him, and I think a lot of fans are too. Funny enough, he's a pretty funny guy on social media. It seems like with the Reese McGuire video and all that other stuff that's gone on in the past.
Yeah. All right. For all your coverage of this matchup against Juan Soto, Francisco Lindor, Huascar Brazoban, all the stars of the Mets. Huascar Brazoban revenge series, his first time back in Miami as an opposing player. Kevin has you covered tonight. Isaac is there as well. Thanks a lot, Kevin. Yeah, one thing I was just reminded of, Daniel, because you brought up the suspension with Profar, it opens up a lot more playing time for Brian De La Cruz in Atlanta.
Yep.
That's one of the ripple effects because DLC is on their roster and he's playing part-time, but that leaves him even thinner for the near future. A lot of DLC over there, who we've seen can be a great hitter at times. He's just incredibly streaky.
Yeah, especially over there in Truist to see how well he performed. How's he been so far? I know we've had limited plate appearances, but has he been? I saw that he struck out. Struck out. You posted that was a little rough there. The Atlanta, they have to go with the DLC experience. It's really a roller coaster. It could be the highest of highs, but also the lowest of lows.
He only had 2 at bats so far this season in his first 4 games. Yeah, so he had not been starting at all to this point, and now he gets thrown into the fire. They have Michael Harris in center, and then it's a lot of like question marks because they've Kelnick playing right field, but he just wasn't very good for most of last year after a hot start. I guess left field is DLCs now for the time being. And the next series is when Marlins play the Braves, so we're going to probably see him in the lineup at least for most of those games, you'd think.
Yeah, it's still crazy, the Profar suspension, 80 games, man. Wow, that's after signing that. But let's go ahead and look at the lineups for today's matchup between the Marlins and the Mets from New York City. It'll be very interesting. Miami's first look at Juan Soto in a Mets uniform and familiar faces, Francisco Lindor, Oscar Brazovan, like Eli mentioned, and maybe most notably, Starling Marte, former Marlin, batting leadoff for the Mets. Before we get into the Marlins and deep dive into Miami's team, let's talk a little bit about the Mets. Eli, Juan Soto, Pete Alonso, after it seemingly was going to come back to the Mets. Oh, he was going to leave in free agency. Eventually does make his return to the Mets. And a very interesting lineup there. Familiar name towards the bottom there, Luis Angel Acuna. But talk to us, Eli, about what really stands out to you. Mark Vientos was really a revelation for them last year. I believe he put up close to a 4 WAR, and they're expecting big things from him from third base with Mark Vientos. And Luis Angel Acuna was a part of the Max Scherzer trade earlier when they had him. Talk to us a little bit about this lineup for the Mets. What intrigues you the most? And obviously, what do you want to see from Juan Soto?
Yeah, they're coming off a bad opening series against Houston. They faced some good pitchers, but as a team, they OPS'd under 500 during that whole series, even though Soto was good. Soto was the only one that did much of anything during those 3 games. So it is, I wouldn't say top heavy, but there's a big drop off towards once you get past Vientos. As we mentioned, Francisco Alvarez, he's hurt for a while. So Luis Torrens is like their primary catcher. Brett Beatty is somebody that used to be a really highly regarded prospect, but he's flopped in the big leagues in several opportunities now. There's a rumor that the Marlins were thinking of trading for him going back a couple winters ago. At this point, I don't see a whole lot of him as much of a threat at all to this point. And, Acuna is kind of interesting. He got called up last year. Not the same upside as his brother, not the same power, but he's good overall. And an interesting break for the Marlins that there's no Lindor in the lineup for tonight.
Yeah,
plays almost every single game when possible, and it looks a lot different when Marte is batting leadoff instead of Lindor. So this is finally the last year of the Marte deal, and I remember like how Marlins fans felt when they traded him away, when he signed with a division rival in free agency. And all things considered, that deal has not worked out very good for the Mets, considering what they paid him. It was good in that first year, and then a lot of missed time due to injury since then. And overall, his production has dropped off quite a bit, where he's more of a league average hitter, if that, and he's somebody that he DHs a lot. Like, he doesn't even bring a whole lot of defensive value at that time. So I as much as everybody, am a little underwhelmed by how that played out, because I thought Marte is a guy that could age pretty gracefully. Yeah, it's a good lineup. It looks a lot better if Lindor's in there and when they get fully healthy. This is getting the Mets at the right time, I think, if you're the Marlins here to potentially steal a series.
Does this look like a $300 million team to you, Eli?
Yeah, when you miss Lindor and McNeil, that's like 45 million of it. So that hurts a lot. And we mentioned even on the pitching side, a lot of those guys are missing. So they are it's a lot of pressure on Soto, even with all these other big accomplished names in there. It is really interesting how he takes up so much of the oxygen. Um, Understandably so. Like he's coming off an amazing year, but they're going to need a lot more than him if they're actually going to repeat what they did last year, much less build upon that.
Yeah, I also want to see about Pete Alonso, just because him coming back to the Mets, bringing so much attention there as well to be complimented by Juan Soto, and this really feels like maybe aside from Lindor, Pete Alonso's finally having a chance to have someone above him who can go ahead and drive in those runs, get on base, and have someone that can lead him in and be able to hit those home runs, drive in those RBIs, and really see how that tandem goes with Pete Alonso. This is what kind of I feel like Pete Alonso has been waiting for his entire time as the Mets, having someone maybe above him that can help him out and complement him in terms of eating up those pitches and really helping out that top of the order. Like you mentioned with Starling Marte, I feel like that's just there because Lindor was taking a little bit of rest off. But that bottom half of the lineup, if we had someone here to talk about the Mets, Mets reporter, Mets writer, they would tell you that it feels like that bottom half is rough, especially maybe with Jose Siri, who just came back, getting signed to the Mets last year. I believe he hit 190, but he is a home run hitter, so it'll be interesting to see what he could do there as well. But enough from the Mets. Let's go and talk about the Marlins. Very interesting lineup there. Eric Wagman hitting third in DH. Who would have thought that would happen a year from now? Derek Hill, who's really off to a great start this season, to go along with Dane Myers. Eli, Graham Pauley starting, Javier Sanoa, Liam Hicks is starting it as catcher. What really shows you for this lineup, and maybe your thoughts, maybe having Wagman there at third, maybe compared to someone like a Dane Myers, or maybe even like a Graham Pauley. Do you think maybe the situation with Eric Wagman is that just to see what he could do potentially, or maybe do you think it's more of a matchup situation there?
Yeah, this is pretty reliant on the platoon situation where Liam Hicks is the only left. Him and Paulie, they have two lefties in there this time. We saw even more lopsided lineups over the weekend against lefties. I'd have to say this is the weakest lineup they've put out so far this season in a small sample. Maybe they surprise again. Or maybe as the previous games have shown, if they are within striking distance late, then maybe Clayton McCullough presses the right buttons and brings in the pinch hitters that he needs late in the game to do some damage. Yeah, with Wagman, I think the quality of contact is pretty solid. I still don't love him as an all-around hitter. I think they're dreaming of him being a Garrett Cooper light type of player, but Coop kind of had this pretty supernatural ability of spraying line drives and finding the gaps in the defense. And I think it's hard to expect anybody to replicate that if they just don't have a ton of athleticism overall. Jonah Bride is another one that I'm going to be watching pretty closely, despite what he did last year. In the top of my mind, I didn't really feel it was all that sustainable with him. Every single game is going to be pretty important. Otherwise, he's somebody that's going to slide down this lineup as the time goes on. Yeah, another opportunity to see Liam Hicks right here, where they didn't really hesitate much to put him on the roster in the first place, but it's kind of unusual for a Rule 5 pick to be playing even as a backup catcher. This is it's a tough spot for a guy that skipped a level, that didn't play at all at AAA. And to this point, it's in limited reps. It's hard to be successful if you're not used to this particular role. So he's a guy that every opportunity he gets, he's trying to make an impression right here. And I just had to shout out both Otto and Dane. Like the numbers were good in that first series, but the eye test was even better. Like both those guys making really great contact that we saw at times last year. With Otto, there was some inconsistency right in the middle of the season that kind of dampened the overall numbers. But I think he is the kind of logical guy for that number 2 spot. I think with X and Otto, that's going to be pretty locked in for the foreseeable future. I think even when Connor Norby gets back, I think those are the top 2. Then you figure out everything else from there. We're going to have some content on Otto coming up just because we're right around the anniversary of when they claimed him off waivers. When he was DFA'd, he was just given away by 2 teams, by both the Blue Jays and the Giants. And now, like, it's hard to deny that he is an everyday caliber player. The only question is whether he is like a borderline all-star type or whether he's just another guy. but just another guy that can play every day and make a lot of contact, play great defense, be a plus base runner. Like that is far and away the best move of the Bendix era to this point.
Yeah, just the way that Otto's been playing. You mentioned his defense, gold glove caliber defense. With Otto Lopez and an important position there at second base, you can really with him at second, he seems like more of a set it and forget it type of guy. You could put him there at second base, and you can rely on his defense to help out the team. Because Eli, we've seen, especially the Pirates series, we didn't get to talk about it. Just the amount of errors the Marlins had as well. I believe at one point throughout a couple games they had like 5 errors combined. What do you make maybe of this defense? I know with Otto, there's always how great he is defensively, but it just seems like maybe this series as well, the errors start to pile up for the Fish. I know we're going back to the Pirates, but it's still maybe a bit of a cause for concern.
Yeah, it's not to pick on one particular guy, but something to keep in mind with Xavier Edwards moving forward. Like he put in work on trying to become a better thrower at shortstop, but even with that, he's like physically a little bit underqualified for the position. And one of the errors was on him being an errant throw that was offline with him. He gets rid of the ball really quickly, but if he's not going to be accurate and if he's not going to even be all that close to velocity wise to the average shortstop, they're going to be hemorrhaging some runs right there. So yeah, I think the infield is still a question about how exactly they handle that. Some of the other errors were on the catching situation, as we touched on, trying to make up for the pitchers being slow to the plate. So that's going to be a lingering concern too, where it's not just that the catchers are bad at throwing, but that they have to like really risk it all and compromise their mechanics in order to make up for the time they're losing from their pitchers on their way to home plate. That's got to be more of a team-wide emphasis. It's going to be really hard to win a series moving forward when you allow 15 stolen bases. And I think more of that was on the pitchers than on the catchers, but the catchers are the ones that get charged with the errors in there. Yeah, so it really needs to be a good defensive team in order to stay afloat at all. And to this point, you like the outfield on that from that standpoint. In Otto, of course, he looks pretty legit, but it's the other positions that have a lot to prove. And it might be a situation where there might not really be fixes on the current roster right now. That may be something they just got addressed by calling up prospects later in the year. Yeah,
before we head into a late prediction time, let's go ahead and talk about this pitching matchup, Eli. These pitching matchups for this week. This week. You mentioned Sandy's going to get to start tomorrow. Cal Control getting to start today, I believe, against Dylan Peterson. And just how interesting these matchups really fare. Maybe both sides. You look at today, it really depends on who you want to see. I think maybe David Peterson might have a little bit of an edge there. Now, the last one, Eli, Clay Holmes very well up in New York. But what do you like from this set of matchups? The second one, very interesting there. Kodai Senga making his first start of the season, I believe, or second start. But very interesting with Kodai Senga going up against Sandy. What do you like from these 3 matchups? 3 very interesting matches where they all have unique storylines.
Yeah, Sandy is going to be a much watched every single time that he pitches for this team. Because we got to admit that we have no idea how long he's still going to be a Marlin as the season plays out. And one note mentioned before is whether that arm angle is still lower compared to what it had been in previous years. That's one trend I'm watching there. And of course, the fact that he's just facing. We poked holes in the lineup, but this is still a much more dangerous lineup than the one he faced in his season debut. And then you mentioned Clay Holmes. Like Clay Holmes, that's a big storyline, a converted reliever who was more good than bad as a reliever, but ended on pretty bad terms in that role. And the Mets made a pretty bold decision to bring him in as a starter. Had a very good spring training. People were very overly excited about his new kick changeup and how that'd be a swing and miss pitch. And his first start was kind of forgettable this season. So that's one where the Marlins know themselves that converting relievers to starters is a mixed bag. Remember AJ Puck? It was very much in the same position as Holmes at this time a year ago, where it looked like he had all the ingredients he needed to make that transition and be serviceable, and he was awful. And within a few weeks, he got moved back to the pen. The Mets don't really have that luxury early on in the year because of their other rotation injuries. So there's a lot of Holmes is going to have a pretty long leash, I think, to get this figured out in that final game. And all things considered, I think the Mets have that advantage in the final one. But in these first 2 games, I think anything could happen right here. I think we're going to see more close games just like we saw each of the last 4 days.
Yeah, to see their Eli, what do you, again with that last matchup, Colin Gillespie going up against Clay Holmes? What do you want to fare from Colin Gillespie in that matchup? Because that first one, he looked fairly well. With he gave up some hits and a home run there, but maybe aside from that, Gillespie gave some solid innings for the Marlins. And what do you hope to see him against the Mets lineup again? Soto, most likely include Lindor and guys like that. Pete Alonso going up against Clay Holmes, reliever turned now starter.
Yeah, but I don't know. I wasn't overly thrilled with. I didn't have very high expectations for Gillespie, despite his good spring training. He's still really relying on his slider to put guys away. It's really shaky fastball velo, and even his command in that first start was kind of hit or miss. He needs to be very precise with his command to be successful for sure, especially against this particular Mets lineup. So that's going to be the biggest thing, is him just being able to throw strikes and eat innings at this point. It's only, as Kevin suggested, we might only be a week and a half, 2 weeks away from Edward Cabrera coming back. And the question is, what happens after that, whether it's Ryan Weathers or somebody else from AAA. With Gillespie, the pressure is going to be kind of on. Like there's a reason why he hasn't had a consistent starting opportunity previously with his big league teams. And that's because it looks like a quad A type of player. And it's going to be really reliant on him getting ahead in counts, throwing strikes. We'll see how that plays out, where he's pitching the final game of that series. And I think it's a getaway day. It's a little bit earlier. Maybe he lucks out and some of the regulars on the Mets lineup get a day off. Maybe that's for some reason a Juan Soto day off where he's available off the bench but doesn't start. I think he's a guy where he's on thin ice to figure things out. But he'll get this start no matter what happens. I think he gets one other start after this, and then they have to figure out what direction they want to go in. Yeah.
I think with that, Eli, if you want to head to prediction time, I have to run out a little early, but if you want to do prediction time now, we could do that. Maybe go a little bit extra because it's just going to be you and I for prediction time.
This is prediction time.
I don't want to toot my own horn here, but I'm really good at this.
Actually, let me bring that up in just a moment. We'll play the video first from the ballpark from our guys, both Kevin Barral and Isaac Azut, if I have it here. Oh, boy. Do I have to really stall for another couple moment here? Let's just take a look at the super sub predictions first then.
Yeah, let's see what they have cooking. I already saw a couple people saying Mets take 2 out of 3. A lot of here in Miami. People are now confident in Miami after that Pirates series. I don't think that's going to be the case here with the Mets. A superior roster there compared to the Pirates, but we have some interesting ones. Dane Myers, Kodai Senga from Isaac. Kodai thinks Kodai Senga is going to have an interesting, be the MVP even with Miami winning. It's called hedging your bets. Kevin, Juan Soto, Miami, again, another hedging your bet. Let's see. Brandon Nimmo, Dane Myers, Francisco Lindor, Sean, that's going to be a tough one. Francisco Lindor have to come out in these last 2 games if he wants he want him to win MVP for you.
Yeah. Now we'll just have Isaac and Kevin explain their thinking in just a few seconds.
Alrighty, series predictions, Marlins and Mets. I'm going to go with the Marlins taking 2 out of 3, but Juan Soto will be my MVP.
I'm going to agree with Mr. Kevin here. I like the pitching matchups in Miami's favor. No Lindor today. I will go Miami 2 out of 3 and series MVP, Kodai Senga.
Back to you, Eli.
Yeah, so our super subs, stream guests, and our staffers are the ones that submit. Remember to become a super sub, fishonfirst.com/subscriptions. If you want to make picks every single series, we keep track of it on the scoreboard. There's not much to look at the scoreboard right now because of how low scoring the previous series was. I got a point, a couple other people got points, but it was most people were wrong about this one. So now we got to have it split down the middle between optimists and the ones that think that Juan Soto is the best thing on earth. So somebody's going to get a lot of points in this one. We will just cue up the music and then start with you, Mr. Daniel, your series predictions.
All right. My series prediction, I'm going to have to go with the majority of people and say the Mets take 2 out of 3. I think they do have the top players. They're going to come out in big situations. But my MVP, I'm going to change it up. Mark Vientos came out strong last season, is going to come out strong again. Mark Vientos is my MVP.
I will stick with the red hot Marlins to keep it going for one more series. I am the one that leans negative on them usually, and I think things are going to fall apart eventually. But for one more series, I think they're meeting the Mets at the ideal time to steal a series, 2 out of 3 in this one. I went with Otto Lopez as my series MVP last time, and that just barely got the job done. This time I'll go with Xavier Edwards, off to a relatively slow start by his ridiculously high standards. I think he'll pile up a ton of hits in this series, leading the Marlins to a 5-2 start, despite the relatively low expectations here.
Ooh, ever the optimist, Eli. Hopefully we could see that happen. But that's going to do it here for FOF Live, presented by About the Fans. As always, you could check out About the Fans. Check out the FOF merch collection. Get 10% off your order with FOF10 at checkout. I'm Daniel Rodriguez, Eli Sussman for Isaac Azut and Ken Barral at the ballpark. FOF Live. As always, go Fish.
Have a wonderful evening.